This is episode 4 of the Grief of Politics, according to my math. Is that right, Avin?
It is.
Yeah. So you're with me, Avin Carroll. I'm Joseph Carlson. And this month, we're going to talk about universal basic income. And it was my topic. I sent you some articles. Mm-hmm. You read them. Mm-hmm. I read them. We both said before we started the podcast, we talked about the New Yorker article. This is why I don't read the New Yorker. I think that I am somewhat okay, well-read. I try to stay up on things, but every time I read a New Yorker article, I feel really dumb. They're very long. You can tell that the author of the article read several books in it and quoted them, which was great. But I feel, as Avin said, it was very long and very, I don't know. So just getting into this, what are your thoughts on, before we get into the articles, what are your thoughts on universal basic income?
So right off the bat, this was something that I wanted to bring up anyway, so we'll just start here right away. Mm-hmm. This is an extremely complicated topic that
I agree.
You know, our little conversation here will like scratch the surface of
with our pinky.
Yeah. The concept of universal basic income has been around for a long time. This is not something new. We're just looking at applying it in a different way than we have before. It's a big hot button issue now because of Andrew Yang in the 2020 election.
I do want to read his book, but right now I'm doing some stuff for my other podcast where I'm reading other books and I can't squeeze in. And then I'm reading for fun because I'm stupid. And I can't squeeze in another book. So when I finish literally the 3 books I'm reading, 3, one's a strategy guide, then I will weave in. But it keeps coming up, especially when I was researching this episode. And I'm like, well, I saw an interview with him and Ben Shapiro when they talked about it. So it was interesting, his take on, just in that hour interview, his take on universal basic income.
Well, and Andrew Yang has brought it to the forefront, but other kind of futurists have discussed it as well, too, right? Mm-hmm. Like it's a big thing from Elon Musk, where he's talked about like we're going to have to look at other ways to take care of societies, because with AI automation and robots and automation and like a lot of jobs are going to go away. So finding a creative solution to that's going to be really important, but it's extremely complicated. Like, I had this thought this morning, which is one I hadn't actually really considered before in reading through the concept of universal basic income, UBI, which is UBI almost lends itself to creating a more divisive world of elites and poor. In the future context of AI and automation and robotics taking over the majority of work in America, the people that are going to suffer the most are going to be the middle class.
Right.
The elites will still be the elites, the people that run the mega corporations and businesses that still manage to succeed, the people that maintain and manage and run these systems that we create.
Yeah, the Bezos 2.0s, the Zuckerberg 2.0s, like when those people, like Bezos is already, retired, right? So whoever comes through Amazon, that's all going to be, he retired. Yeah. For audio listeners, Avin just did quotes. But he stepped away from the board, right? So there's going to be another Bezos with possibly.
Yeah, but I mean, we're looking at the next level of innovation, right? Like Amazon's an established technology and established business at this point.
Anecdotally, I do know people that have worked for them that they do care about robotics and automation and all that kind of stuff. They do have divisions that work on that.
And the super high level people working in AI are developing AI to write computer code. So a lot of people right now that are, making really good money and building applications and web apps and back end development are also going to be at risk of losing their jobs because
some of that
computers are going to write their own code.
That's crazy, but it might be good with just the amount of man hours it takes to, like, I'm a big fan of video games. You think of all the man hours it takes to write a game and write the code for that, and the years that people spend on that. If there's AI that can offload that and go, hey, we, instead of 5 years, this is now a 3-year project, you know? And now we're really having more quality assurance. And this goes for every app or anything. Now there's more quality assurance. We can start testing this sooner to see if it works. We can have it up and running. You know, we can test servers. Again, I'm talking about games, but this works for every app. You know, there is a golden sliver. You know, there's a good part to AI. I think the bad Skynet future is what we all have been fed, but and Elon Musk too. I've seen him talk about the dangers of AI. Of course, he was high on Joe Rogan's podcast, so that shows you like where the level of conversation was going. You know,
I mean, just because you're high, if you're a really smart person that's high, you're still going to talk about the things you nerd out and get excited about, right?
Yeah, it was weird though. You imagine, I've seen people high before. I've never imbued, but they kind of relax. And when seeing Elon Musk get high, he was just the same. So I was like, either his tolerance is incredible or he's at such another higher level that it doesn't matter. Like the weed doesn't matter anymore that he is. Anyway, back to Universal Basic Income.
You know, that's a concern for me. Like if that's actually the world we come to. But with that said, too, I mean, historically, there's always been these fears of like, oh, well, you know, when we develop a car, we're going to get rid of all these people that drive horse carriages and take things around. Well, no, those jobs changed or converted. When factories moved into being robotic factories, like, everyone was concerned that these jobs were going to go away, and we actually made more jobs when we started doing this. Every time there's a disruptive technology, everyone's concerned that jobs are going to go away, more jobs get created, different jobs get created. Not related to this, I was reading an article earlier in the week, and it reminded me this morning of it, reading through a couple of these articles that you sent me, of other jobs that are going to become more important. Oh, I was watching an interview with Kevin O'Leary, and he had talked about, you'd recognize him if you saw him, Mr. Wonderful. He was on Shark Tank.
Oh, yeah, I haven't watched Shark Tank, but I've seen those, like, you know, show us what you got type things on.
Yeah.
You know.
I think it's Kevin O'Leary. Maybe I'm getting his last name wrong. Anyway, he was talking about, like, for his businesses, one of the areas where he's seen the most growth over the last year, 2 years, is in artistic creatives, because now you want to differentiate yourself, and it's not just about writing code, but having people that understand the human experience and interaction and beauty and that. And so, you know, maybe the economy shifts into a more artistic world. AI might be able to write these applications and programs, but now we're writing more books or doing more art. And so there could be a shift where the economy is going to go. But I don't know. UBI is a really interesting concept. I think it's extremely challenging to figure out the right way to apply it so that you're lifting people up, but you're not enabling them to not do anything.
Right. Well, there was an article that I didn't include, and I got sent to it by a friend about, I think in Oakland, they're starting a program, and they were just, to be a liberal hippie and defend the program, the article read, it was from the Wall Street Journal, and they said they're only giving this stipend to, you can only be a black family to get this money. And my friend sent it to me and said, that's racist. But if you read, it is a pilot program in that area, meaning that they're using it as like a scientific study to say, if we give this money to this group of people, what will happen? And so that's me being a liberal hippie defending the program. I don't think it's right that they're excluding white families or any other families from the money. But again, reading the article, I think that we didn't include in this discussion was the idea that these are all pilot programs that are used to gather data to put on the pile of data. So I didn't look at it as like, this is racist. I looked at it as like, we picked 100 families that are the most disenfranchised in this area. They are black. Or specifically, we do want to give this money to black, families because we want to see what happens, because they've been hurt the most. So, and I hate to say it, so let's start with the article I gave you. It was the it was by hang on.
The NPR one.
Yeah, there was the NPR one. Sorry, I had another one. So this NPR one was good. It's called. It was by NPR. It was published on March 4th, 2021, by Rachel Treisman. It says the California program giving 500 no strings attached stipends pays off, the study finds, and it goes into Michael Tubbs, which is the mayor of Stockton, California, started this program called the Stockton Economic Empowerment Demonstration, or SEED. It was founded in February 2019 by then Mayor Michael Stubbs and funded by donors, including the Economic Security Project. That's a quote
Tubbs.
from the... Yeah. Oh, wait, what?
Tubbs, not Stubbs.
Oh, Tubbs, sorry. It gave 125 people... This is a quote from the article. It gave 125 people living in neighborhoods at or below Stockton's medium household income the unconditional monthly stipend of $500. I'm adding that. A study finds a study of the period from February 2019 to 2020, conducted by a team of independent researchers, determined that full-time employment rose among those who received the guaranteed income, and their financial, physical, and emotional health improved. And so what happened was I sent this article. I'd heard of Mr. Tubbs before. I'd heard him speaking, and this was really the only article I could find. He linked a Twitter account to actual stats that they have. I was able to open it when I sent you the articles, but when I tried to open it this morning to, just have it open to have stats, it wouldn't open on Twitter. But then I found a Business Insider article, which originally got me interested in this topic. It basically is a different write-up of the same story, and they have stats in the article for where they got, so right here, this is from the Business Insider article, and it was called "A California City Gave Some Residents $500 per month. After a year, the group wound up with more full-time jobs and less depression." And this was written by Aria Bendix on March 3rd, 2021. She posted it at 6:01 a.m. So go there and read the article. It's Business Insider. But this actually is basically the same write-up, but it has more stats. So... as Mayor Tubbs spearheaded the Stockton Economic Empowerment Demonstration, a pilot program that gave 125 residents debit cards loaded with $500 each month. The program launched in February 2019 and ended in January. And then it goes on. Let's see. So participants in Stockton's basic income program spent most of their stipends on essential items. Nearly 37% of recipients' payments went to food, while 22% went towards sales and merchandise, such as trips to Walmarts or dollar stores. Another 11% was spent on utilities, and 10% was spent on auto costs. Less than 1% when money went towards alcohol or tobacco. By February 2020, more than half of the participants said they had enough cash to cover an unexpected expense, compared with 25% of participants at the start of the program. The portion of the participants who were making payments on their debt rose to 62% from 52% during the program's first year. Unemployment among basic income recipients dropped to 8% in February 2020 from 12% in February 2019. In the experiment's control group, those who did not receive the monthly stipends, unemployment rose from 15% from 14%. Full-time employment among basic income recipients rose to 40% from 28% during the program's first year. In the control group, full-time employment increased as well, though less dramatically, from 37% from 32%. So, yeah, there's a massive... as you can see, there's a massive uptick in employment. People were able to pay off debt. In the article I sent you, Tubbs said that he heard that anecdotally people were able to take time off work if during the pandemic, if their doctor told them to stay home, because they knew they would have PTO wouldn't be a problem and they would have that money coming in. So that was another thing. They said that there wasn't any kind of stat behind it, but people had to fill out questionnaires and things like that they would send to people, apparently. From what I'm inferring from this, they would give interviews. They have a website you can go to and look at people's testimonials, things like that. So what say you so far to the info?
By the way, I just sent you the link to that Twitter.
Oh, you got it to work? Cool.
Yeah, it opened for me. It has the same
I
stats,
just-
but also some other quotes and some other stuff in it.
Yeah, I did it. Again, Wednesday when I sent you all this stuff, it worked fine, and I read it and go, great. I'll open this when we do the podcast. And 10 minutes before I went to go live, it was like, come on, man. Like, see, there we go. Okay, cool. Yeah.
Okay.
So,
like this is a really good application sample, right? The challenge I have with the particular study here is it's just really, really small. So the unemployment rate went from 12% to 8% of 125 people.
Yeah.
So, like, what is 4% of 125 people?
4% of 100 is 4
like
people,
6?
right? Yeah, so 6 people maybe.
Roughly. I mean, that's a really small sample size, and it's really difficult to see if this is actually what enabled that. However, if you were to spread that out to a whole population, if you were to do 10,000 people and had a 4% unemployment, like that'd be a way better stat. Still, I mean, it's encouraging results.
Right. I think
not
the problem, one of the articles we'll bring up later is it is an issue of cost and how that money will be, and my friend rightfully pointed out when I shared this with him, he's very conservative. He said, who's paying for this, which is a legitimate concern. There's the other article we'll bring up. They have a total cost of what it would cost to have universal basic income. And
in that particular context, yes.
So it is true. Like my counter to that, because I talked to him after, this was weeks ago, is it costs a lot up front, but you save money in the long run. If people are being employed, they're obviously being taxed. And not only that, but they're spending money in the community. So you're going to restaurants, you're buying goods in your community, you're purchasing more things online. You're, doing what the middle class does. Kind of. We've talked about before how it's like the middle class is important. Like
this isn't even the middle class. This is
like poor.
Like, this particular study. This is poor. This is the bottom wage earners in this community that they were using for this stipend, right? They wanted to see how much of an impact it would have at the bottom end of income.
And like you said, it's a small sample size, but it is encouraging.
So the results are really encouraging, right? Like how much of an impact does it take? Paying for this, like this particular study was funded from a little bit of city money and supported by private donors and organizations.
I think Starbucks was listed in the one article.
So, you can only do a very small sample size of people, right? Like 125 people times 500 times 24 months is a ton of money.
Yeah.
And that's a $500 stipend, right? Like that's not even basic subsistence, right? They still have to have other income on top of that.
Right. Yeah.
Because you can't, especially in Stockton, like where are you going to pay rent for $500 a month, let alone buy groceries, anything else?
Yeah, reading the article, what people said is it's just a safety net, of like...
Yeah, it cuts the edge off.
Right, which is pretty good,
Someone in here, in the tweet, there's a quote of someone who was talking about having panic attacks and they had to take medication for it and they haven't needed them because they, like, this extra money gave them that cushion, that safety net. They weren't as concerned about it. What does it say? Recipients of guaranteed income were healthier, showing less depression and anxiety, and had enhanced well-being.
Yeah.
Mental state has an impact on our health. It has an impact on heart health, other physical factors. There's a big part of that we still don't really even fully understand in medicine of how a person's mental state impacts their physical well-being.
Right, yeah.
And we do understand some components of it, right? Like stress impacts our stomach, our intestines. Mm-hmm. It's a big reason why people get ulcers, and like there's a physical impact too.
It's got to be like on the top of the list for why people get ulcers is stress. I don't know if I can't find any medical stuff, but it always seems like you talk to people with ulcers and they're just a ball of stress.
There's all kinds of other health factors that we maybe don't even fully understand on the mental health side of it. So the problem I have with the study is just its size. But to get a bigger study is challenging. I don't remember, a Scandinavian country in the middle of the 20-teens did a pretty big study, and they actually gave a very large chunk of money to...
Was it the Netherlands? Because I think that's in the second article. They actually bring that up.
One of the articles talks about the Netherlands, but I don't think it was even that one specifically. But maybe it was. And again, they had, pretty overwhelmingly positive results, but they were giving people a very large sum of money. I think it was like $2,000.
Oh, so the second article is by BritanniaProcon.org, and I don't think there's an author listed because this, I think, is just like it's called Universal Basic Income, Top 3 Pros and Cons, and like it's the second con here where it says UBI is too expensive, and I believe this is the third paragraph. It says, well, yeah, it is the third paragraph. The UBI trial in Finland, provided participants with 600 or 560 euros a month for 2 years. But the MS chief economist of the Central Organization of Finnish Trade, so the trade minister basically seems like he said it's impossibly expensive since it would increase the government's deficit by 5% of GDP. So yeah, that's the thing, is going back to who is paying for this. You know, how are we paying for this?
And in this discussion of how you pay for it, one of the most common answers I've heard, and it's another Scandinavian country was experimenting or throwing this idea around, and I actually kind of like this idea, was instead of providing social benefit programs, food stamps, welfare, housing assistance, providing that money directly. So instead of tying these programs to, like, this money is going for Section 8, this money is your food stamps, this money is for that. Instead, the government is directly giving you that cash and letting you decide how to spend it. Do you want to spend it on healthcare? Do you want to spend it on food? It's providing people with a little bit of autonomy in how to use the money. Of course, the fear is that people would use it to buy drugs or alcohol.
Yeah, but it seems like more and more of these studies, that seems less and less the case. It seems like the more and more of these studies that come in, a lot of people are, like you said, it cuts the edge off. It's the idea of being able to pay a medical bill. It seems like it is definitely on the right, and I've seen it from like the Blaze and Ben Shapiro. And Ben Shapiro brought it up to Andrew Yang when they had that interview. They have a Sunday conversation. I don't know the exact title, but Ben Shapiro has these Sunday conversations with people, and they're usually about an hour long, and he had Andrew Yang on. So just look up Andrew Yang and Ben Shapiro and you'll find it. But I watched it. It was very interesting. And they do the thing where the Daily Wire, Ben Shapiro's thing, is paywalled. So they give you an hour of the interview and say, if you want to watch the next hour, just subscribe to our channel or our service. And I thought the hour was good. I didn't want to subscribe to Ben Shapiro's channel for... He's the only person, like Andrew Yang is one of the few people I've seen on there where I've listened to them talk. But Andrew Yang, like you're saying at the beginning, was like, hey, we're going to have to do something with these people that are truckers. AI is going to take over and automation is going to take over in a big way. How do we prepare for that? And we're going to have to do something, so, I guess in a perfect world, it'd be something like the heyday of the Alaskan Fund, which was the oil companies that were, pumping oil out of Alaska, were giving residents money. And I remember 20 years ago, being in college, it shows how old I am, but talking to people from Alaska, and they said it's great. But reading about it now, oil prices have tanked. So the government in Alaska is trying to figure out, do we cut the payments? Because we guaranteed this for life. Like, how do we pay for it? And I think in a system where if oil wasn't so terrible, if there was something like that where it's like, well, you're taking a natural resource, so you owe us this. So it's like it's paying for itself in a way of like, you're getting something, you're giving something. Like it's a...
Well, and
being a big anime fan...
The New Yorker article does discuss the specifics of it. At its peak, it was like $2,090, and like now it's down to like $600.
Right.
So it's tied to the cost of oil and how much money the government's taking in from this program, which, it's fantastic. It makes a big difference for Alaskan residents that are able to get that. The other example that we could look at if we wanted to have a good sample, and this is interesting that people aren't really talking about, but it's like Native Americans that are receiving government money. Or money back from the tribe. Like
reparations almost.
I lived in Edgewood. And my stepsister went to high school at the Puyallup High School. And a lot of Native kids went there, got a check from the tribe or from the government. I don't know exactly the specifics. And so I do not know the details I do not know the specifics. I only know the perception. And so my numbers on this could be really far off. If anyone knows the specifics, I would actually be really interested to hear that or know where to go. But at that time, I believe it was something like $2,000 a month.
Yeah, that's almost like a reparation almost.
The kids, when they'd turn 18, would start getting this money. And maybe it was $1,000. I have no idea, right? Like, this is what my stepsister was telling me when we were, teenagers. So 20-year-old information.
Yeah.
But the kids were getting $1,000, $2,000 a month. And so what ended up happening is they would, spend the money on cars and shoes and they all wore nice clothes and stuff when they'd get to this point because they'd spend the money on frivolous things. Now, these are kids. These aren't adults. They're not
they're like 17-year-old or 18-year-old kids. I would do the same thing. Hey, man, I want that new game system, or whatever. I blow that. Like, I do that.
But
the future.
On the flip side of it, too, like the common refrain, the common argument about that at the time was, well, go look at the tribal land and look at the houses and how beat up they are and the cars piled in the yard. And so there's this anti-argument about giving free money because when you don't work for it, you don't respect it.
Well, I mean, I don't want to get into that because that's like a whole issue of
100%. That's why I'm saying I really want to be very careful on that.
I know it's
very different with tribal funds money versus UBI, right? And
it's then also
very different.
There's the idea. I know it's a horrible 4-letter word on the right, but when you talk about systemic problems, when you use the word systemic on the right, that's a word. It seems like it, Avin. Let me tell you, watching conservative news sometimes, just using the word systemic in front of something, it's like all the hosts just throw over the tables and want to leave because, they get really upset when you start talking about systems. And again, the word systemic is such a, at least from what I've seen watching, the Blaze, Ben
Joe, you're an idiot. You're an idiot, Joe.
I'm just saying.
Now, look, everything you just said, totally, the moment you use the word systemic, every word that came after that was just dumb.
Don't flip your table. Your laptop's on there. Don't do it. But I think now would probably be
heavy to flip.
It's weighted. I think now would be a good time to bring up. So, that BritannicaProcon.org. I just want to read because the first article was pretty positive about it. So I kind of want to
before you go too far on that though, circling back, I went way off into the weeds. The point I was making is okay. On the paying for it thing, I actually do kind of like the concept of disconnecting our existing social programs and using that money to fund the UBI. Right. Empowering people to allocate those funds where they want to allocate it. Because, maybe you don't need $400 worth of food. You could really be really frugal and you could instead use that money to pay for
You need it for your mortgage or rent. You'd be like, I can go $200 and then I need $200 from my mortgage. Correct. Like I'm behind. Or I have property tax. There's tons of stuff. Hey, Correct. My tires are bald. It's right. $200 for a set of tires. I need
to pay for, here in Washington, I got to pay my registration fee for my car so I can keep driving without getting a ticket.
Right. And then it's anything. And I think there was it one of these articles that mentioned that or maybe it was the New Yorker article. We'll get onto that later, but I think it was a New Yorker article that mentioned there was a system where they were food stamps, this, that, you get so much for this. And then they said doing away with that was actually better. But let's go over the cons because the first article was kind of pro. So the con number one from this Britannica article, again, look it up. When was it? It doesn't even say when it was published. Maybe 2/25/21 is when it was. This was updated, so we'll just go with that. So the first con is that universal basic income takes money from poor and gives it to everyone, increasing poverty and depriving the poor of much needed support. Now, here's the one thing that I want to bring up when I read this. In the last article that we read, there was a lot of stats, and then I read the other supplement article where there were stats. When I read this first pro, there was a lot of this model was run, which doesn't mean that they're wrong. What I'm saying is, they were running if this happens, then an as-if statement in programming, as opposed to actually having data from people that it seemed like got a UBI. This was if you do this, then it's terrible. And that's what our models show. And it's it says it doesn't cure. It says right here, UBI are also less effective also less cost-effective than targeting welfare programs because many people lack more than just cash. UBI does not cure addiction, poor health, lack of skills, or other factors that contribute to exacerbating poverty. The danger, and this is a quote from Anna, I'll just read the thing.
Coote.
Anna Coote, Principal Fellow at the New Economics Foundation, and Endar Yetzi, PhD student, explained there's the danger of UBI, quote, the danger of UBI in entrenching low pay and precarious work. It could effectively subsidize employers who pay low wages and by creating a small cushion for workers on a short-term or zero-hour contracts, help to normalize precarity. UBI would become like any other American tipping system in which employers pay low wages and count on... Yeah, that last part makes a little bit of sense. The fact that you're receiving money, I got the $500, so I can take this job for $13 an hour. When you could just say to yourself, maybe that $13 an hour job was the problem with me in the first place, and if I just got paid $17 an hour, I wouldn't need the $500 an hour. So I get that. And also there was an article, this didn't really have to do with UBI, but I was reading it a few days ago about now that restaurants are opening with the pandemic, some restaurants in some areas are having a hard time trying to fill vacancies. Yep. Because they said, nobody wants a job anymore. People are lazy is basically what I read in the article. I'm paraphrasing, but the guy was mad that he couldn't fill these vacancies because obviously he's running a restaurant. But what I thought was interesting was people were responding saying, well, maybe you need to offer people more money an hour, because people have, through whatever reason, they blame the stimulus check. I think it was maybe some of that. And some of it is, I think we talked about it a little bit during the pandemic. You have time to sit and reflect and maybe do a little bit more math and say, now that I have time to sit and think about this is probably the problem, is the fact that this job is only paying $8 an hour and I need a job that pays $12 an hour. So now I need to look for a job that pays $12 an hour.
Actually, interestingly enough, I was, another interview for financial stuff. The CEO of Darden Restaurants was talking about Red Lobster. The average earner for a server at Red Lobster with tips is $20 an hour.
It's pretty good.
But
that's with tips.
Their concern, it is, but I mean, that's a pretty good income. I've known people that work in restaurants as servers that make really good money with their tips because they're working at higher level restaurants. They're not working at Sherry's or Denny's, not to denigrate those, but you're not getting super high-end people.
Don't make fun of the Grand Slam, man. They need to bring back the Hobbit breakfast. If they did that, I would be to Denny's quickly.
I'm just saying, I don't know, if there'd be equivalent tipping on, say someone working at Daniel's Broiler versus Denny's.
But yeah, I mean, some of it too is there's swings, right? I know people in wait staff, so you get a really good night and then you get a really bad night.
So anyway, he was saying that that's kind of their average earnings there. Now, there's obviously, depending on which restaurants you're at, depending on what your minimum wage is at, but in each state, because every state's different. But I don't know if that's necessarily the case. Like I personally still think there's a lot of wait staff out there and serving staff that is really concerned for health reasons about going back to work, and until they're really feeling comfortable, particularly in our area, because our area is not, we're not Texas where people are like, whatever.
Yeah, I think we might have to do a whole episode on Texas, because the more it's almost like this weird, like everybody makes fun of Florida, but the more I read about Texas, I'm like, what a weird place. What a weird, strange... You lived in Texas for a while. I met some of your friends from Texas. It's just, every time I talk to someone native Texan or read about Texas, I'm like, what is... You guys are like kind of a... You guys are like a sibling of Florida, kind of, for weirdness. Oh, yeah.
Totally different.
Well, it's just... it's a weird experiment, I think, that is... certain parts. Anyway.
It's foreign and unique compared to us, but it's Florida man and Texas man are very different people. So I think a lot of what you're running into for that hiring, and I've read articles on this too, and I think they keep missing it, is that people are afraid of still going back to work because of health concerns. And we could go into that again on a totally different situation as well.
Oh, yeah.
The idea, however, that, and I was reading this in the New Yorker article, again, they're bringing it up here at Con 2 on this
Yeah,
Botanica.
we'll probably get to the New Yorker
Procon.
article. I don't know how much we're gonna quote it, because again, I just feel like a big dum-dum and have to lay down and put a towel
There's
over
a
my head.
lot
and
of really good content in there.
Okay, well, you
with
can
a
go over that.
smattering of, like, I need to brag with my vocabulary.
Again, yeah. I mean, you get hired at the New Yorker to do one thing, and this person did it well. It's just, I feel just useless whenever
the point being that you enable the system of low wages to be maintained when you have a UBI. There's arguments that that's true, and there's arguments that that's not true, because on one end of it, when you're enabling a person to be able to be like, you know what, I don't need this job. I've got this little bit of extra cash on the side. I can go look for something else. And so there is an argument to be made that it enables people to look for something better, or to better themselves to get out of a low-paying job. But on the flip side of it, like you said, it enables a person too to be like, I'm going to take this job for $11.35 an hour because I've got this extra money coming from the government. I can still afford to live on this.
Right.
So I don't know where that goes, and that would be like a government regulatory issue. Like, where do we control
where it go, like
minimum wages?
Well, you said when we were going to talk about this, you said, I don't like the fact that government is controlling wage, which is a fair thing, because reading about, especially the new administration, you're like, what's going on?
My biggest concern with UBI. So right off the bat, the beginning of con number 2 is UBI is too expensive. One of the other things is con number 1, UBI takes money from the poor and gives it to everyone, increasing poverty. So right off the bat, the concept of a universal basic income. Every single, in the context of America, every single American, or whatever country you live in, gets a stipend of blank amount. So right off the bat, I think the vast majority of Americans would go, no. Just like the stimulus checks that came out. Lisa and I didn't need the stimulus checks.
Right. Well, maybe it's just like the stimulus checks, like you're saying, is under this income threshold, this is where you get UBI. So yeah, we're calling it UBI, or maybe we call it just basic income. I've heard it called several things. Maybe it's a thing where you're like abject poverty. You get, and maybe it's a sliding scale. You're homeless.
But then it becomes really complicated. You add government overhead, you add management overhead, then government's making decisions of who does need it, who doesn't need it. Then it becomes really complex. So the really cool idea of universal basic income is it's super simple, right? But you're also right. Like, I think at that point, you need to create some kind of a sliding scale where you're shotgunning cash out to the world. And maybe some people don't need it, but you're really helping those that really do need it, which is what we did with our stimulus with COVID.
Yeah, that was still gated, though, by your income, right? Like you...
Correct.
So... I don't know anybody that didn't get a stimulus. Nobody that I know was in that income bracket. But yeah, there was a cutoff.
I know some people.
Oh, okay. Brags a lot over there. I
know
don't.
2 people.
Oh, okay. That's 2 more than I. But yeah, I think that is what is. That's what it is, and I think. But like you're saying again, the other side of the coin is that. Yeah, there's government oversight and all these terrible things that are going to happen. But what'll happen then is, like, if some of those jobs go away, if you don't need food stamps or whatever, then those people will just get allocated to be like a caseworker for these people that, you know what I mean? Like, we're not giving you food stamps. We're just caseworking your life. If you're literally living on the streets right now and we're giving you $1,000, you got to go to a mental health expert. You have to go to this caseworker. We got you a... a HUD house, like,
if I'm giving you $500 a month in Stockton, California, versus giving you $500 a month in
New York,
Paris, Texas, which, by the way, Paris, Texas is a really, 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 really small town.
Yeah, I keep hearing
that. $500 goes way further in Texas than it does in Stockton. Right? And I just grabbed Paris because it was the smallest town I could think of off the top of my head.
Is it? I mean, you've probably been through there. Is it one of those things where if you blink, you don't know that you've gone through Paris, Texas? Like,
actually, I never went when I was there. It's not that small. No, it's a couple thousand people. But I mean, there's a lot of small towns in
everywhere.
Central America, the flyover states, if you would, that $500 would go really, really far. In comparison to LA, Seattle, San Francisco. So do you do a federal UBI? But maybe we don't call it a UBI. Maybe we call it like a basic subsistence payment, like anyone that's earning under like a certain amount.
Like we were just talking, like a sliding scale. Like, hey, you get this much because you're in abject poverty, and then as it goes up, your payments go down.
But does that sliding scale also end up adjusting for cost of living where you live? Or like, this is what you get, and so because of that, like, you're forced to move somewhere cheaper. And do those cheaper areas become more expensive because people with this government money move into these areas, and there's like this whole
you mean gentrification? Yeah,
economic thing that you have. Well, it's not really gentrification, right? It's you're moving someplace that's extremely low population, and so because of that, the town's dying, everything's cheap. So, let's say we start doing this, and people that are really poor in New York, in Seattle, and LA, and Portland, and like these really expensive cities, like these poor people who are barely scraping by get this money, and they're like, I'm going to uproot myself and move into Kansas somewhere, Oklahoma. I'm going to go live next to Tiger King.
Right. Oh, no, don't do that.
Yeah, we're bringing that up. Carol Baskin, man.
I haven't watched it yet. I'm kind of scared to watch it, actually.
Oh, man. It's an event. So when people start moving into those areas, like the cost of living goes up because there's competition for it. Now, there is a lot of unused land that could benefit from that. Mm-hmm. But there still has to be some kind of work, so people aren't just going to move out. I mean, you might move out there and just live off of your bare amount of money. But I don't think that's the idea, right? Like, the concept is to empower people. There's still going to be those people that take the bare minimum, and there's still going to be those people that, like, I'm still not going to work. Mm-hmm. I'm just going to take this money. I'm going to keep, being, as we would say, a bum. And I don't mean a bum like a bum on the side of the street. I mean, like,
a layabout.
Yeah, a layabout. Yeah. Someone who's going to be lazy. He's just going to take the money and, couch surf or still live on the street and still do their drugs, but they're going to have a little bit more cash. The hope is to take those people that maybe are stuck where they are because their human dignity has been lowered because of they can't make enough money, they can't get a car because maybe they've got tickets they can't pay, a lot of the other things. It gives them just enough dignity to dig themselves out of the hole and raise themselves back up.
Yeah, I mean, just like that first article mentioned, which I guess now would be a good time to bring up the New York article. Not that I'm excited to do this. I think the only reason, not the only reason, but one of the reasons I did select it was the fact that it was very large and encompassing. It brought about probably the first thing of universal basic income, the first iteration, which was in 1795 in an English village of Speenhimland, which, come on, Britain, what's going on with the names? I mean, I'm not saying we got it all right in the States here. We just name things after other things. So we're just like, Paris is a good name in town. We'll name that after Texas. But I mean, the three Speenhimland. I mean, anyway, long story short, they talked about the idle poor and how they were trying to give away bread stipends to people. Mm-hmm. And then they found out that, people didn't want to work because they were just getting bread. And then later on, other people looked into the notes that they kept at the time and kind of had a different read on the situation, saying, no, actually, maybe it was because all these magistrates were holding on and these priests were holding on to this stuff. People realized they wanted to do something else. Or anyway, it was a very good article, and there's several books. So to quote the source, it's Who Really Stands to Win from Universal Basic Income. It was written by Nathan Heller on July 2nd, 2018. And it's a very long article. He quotes several books written by very intelligent people. Even talked about Richard Nixon and how Richard Nixon was going to do something similar, but then kind of got spooked by this story of Speenhimland, and some other advisors were telling him, this is kind of bad. It'll push people out of work. But it's interesting.
Yeah, it's an extremely interesting article and very thorough. And he definitely, in my opinion, does a really good job of kind of dancing the perspective of conservative versus liberal ideologies in it. One of the most in-depth reviews of the concept of UBI that I've ever read. He talks through the Finland study. It must have started in 2017 because this article was written in 2018. He talks about the Oakland study that you talked about, the Stockton study, and really goes in depth into this discussion. Like the one part that he quoted in here, and you were kind of talking about this earlier about like if it was going to cost like $3.9 trillion a year or whatever, which is just an absurdly huge amount of money. It's close to the entire expenditure of the entire federal government is what he says. But that's if we gave every single American $1,000 a month.
And that's
right off
insane.
the bat, we would never do that.
Yeah, like what is Mark Zuckerberg going to do with that money? Yeah, get bent, Mark Zuckerberg. Like,
and the author that he's quoting that talked about this, what book was it that he's quoting for this one?
There's so many. Which is good. It's just when you're like, oh, this? Okay.
Lowry. I'm not getting the quote. Where is the author? He quotes this author quite a bit. Economic journalist Annie Lowry is in the book Give People Money: How a Universal Basic Income Would End Poverty, Revolutionize Work, and Remake the World. So Annie Lowry makes this kind of position, and she's the one that came up with if everyone got $1,000 in the country, it'd be $3.9 trillion a year, or close to the current expenditure of the entire federal government.
All right.
To pay for this, she proposes new taxes on all kinds of different things. And then makes the argument of like the Bush tax cuts were not paid for. The war in Iraq and Afghanistan were not paid for. So like we can come up with these and find the money out there.
Right. There's an old clip floating around where a Fox News journalist, they were talking about the Green New Deal or something, and he went to this guy in a bar, like they're just like man on the street type stuff, and the guy is a liberal hippie like me, and basically says the same thing. It's this idea that, you know, how do we pay for the war? How do we pay for World War II? How do we pay for Iraq? Like we chose, how do we pay for going to the moon? We decided it was something that we needed to do when we found money to pay for it, you know, whether that be good or bad. That's how it works in America. It's like, well, we have to do this. It's a need. So again, not to say that UBI is not going to be costly or stuff like that, but like we as Americans have to say, this is how it is. AI is going to take over these people's jobs. We have to find a solution, and this is what it is, you know?
Yep. And how we find that solution is really going to be important, because ultimately, if AI does take all these jobs, then we really are going to run into a situation of the haves and the have-nots.
Right.
And we're going to have to completely restructure society, because I don't think it'll be fully dystopian like, you know, Elysium, where the super wealthy and rich live in mega cities in the sky, and the poor live in the dredges on Earth.
Yeah, spoilers, they can also like 3D reprint their body if they get injured, which is pretty amazing.
Yeah.
Where's that?
I don't think it would get quite that far, but we've already proven that when government is giving everyone basically the same exact level of stuff, that life becomes really miserable. You end up with the projects, essentially, and all human dignity eventually gets wiped out.
I think again, that's a whole other, again, don't want to use a 4-letter word, that's a systemic.
But that's where I'm saying, like, we have to restructure society if that's going to come out, because we want to avoid those repeats, those dystopian perspectives. And that gets super deep. And that's why I said at the very beginning of this is an extremely complicated issue. There's so many nuances, and like Andrew Yang coming out, like, we should just do it. Like, to everyone on the surface, it's like, cool, $1,000 a month from the government for free, $500 a month from the government for free. Heck yeah, I want it. Woo!
Yeah,
tax the rich, give me the money.
Yeah,
But
I
it
think
gets
it's
so much more complex.
I think again, you and I agree on a lot of stuff and disagree on a lot of stuff. I think there is this thing on the right that I keep saying, where like whether it be climate change or like universal basic income or like these things that I think are important, the right is always like, we don't really have all the info yet, so can we just wait? And on the left, there's a thing of like, let's just do it, which there has to be a middle ground to say, we can't just do this, but we need to make sure that this is important and we focus on it instead of just literally kicking the can down the road for whatever the issue is going, well, we'll deal with this later. Like, especially with climate change, I have eyeballs and I have skin that goes outside, and it blows my mind that people are like, oh, it's not really a thing. You're like, do you live? Anyway, that's a aside. I think you and I both agree, though, that universal basic income is viable if done correctly. So, again, that's based on...
What is correctly? I think there's been a lot of studies, and almost every single study that has been done has come away with positive results.
Right.
I am a believer that when you treat people with respect and decency, and you give them the ability to treat themselves with respect and have dignity, they will naturally do better. Mm-hmm. There is a subset of our population that will always not do better.
Yeah, and I mean, those aren't, let's just be clear, those aren't poor people, because I think there's a lot of people in the news that have tons of money that do bad things. So it isn't just... Yeah. I think on the right, there's this feeling that it's the poor people that are ripping us off. It's like, well, the rich people do it too. So
I think rich people rip us off a lot more than
I think they rip us off a lot more.
That's a very different conversation.
To wrap it up, what are your final kind of, after reading these articles, did you get swayed anyway, one way or another? I know when I presented the thing, you were shaking your head like, no. What do you think now after reading this stuff? Did it change your mind or anything? Or
no. But my perspective is basically the same. I mean, all this information that you shared is all basically the same as what I've read. It's given me some more reservations. It's given me different ideas or concepts on necessarily how we might do it and find a way to do it.
Right.
My biggest concern with universal basic income is, however, not assuaged by this. And that is that when the government controls a person's income, they control that person. Mm-hmm. And so now, what happens to elections? The moment your money comes from the government,
I mean, that's
elected
already
officials,
happening, though. Like, that's already...
Correct, but it's a much smaller subset, and they don't have as much power, right? Because these government programs are out there. But when it is the federal government, not local governments, when it's the federal government that controls your income, controls your money, it is far more difficult to make a truly informed voting decision, because now, like, all right, well, if I vote for this guy, like, he's going to cut my pay by 20%, but I agree with a lot of the stuff he says. I don't agree with this person's perspective, but they're going to let me keep my money, or they're going to give me a 5% raise by taxing these other people.
Right. And yeah, I mean, everything you're saying is true. But that's why it gets really difficult. Like, I don't think my position really changed on any of this. I think what's interesting about this is there is more data coming out, and it seems to be more positive. And for me, that is hopeful. So instead of everybody going, every time I see, again, on the right, these people like on Fox News say, well, it's a pie in the sky, whatever. It's like, well, what about all these studies that prove that it is not? What about all these things that say it is not? Yes, it is a small sample size, but again, like you and I talked about, where do you pay for it? Where does the money come from? So when we find money to pay for this and do put it into a program or a pilot program, then it seems like it has a positive effect. So what do we extrapolate from these positive effects and try to get that on a much bigger scale? How do we move forward with that? The thing now is the government going, all right, it's going to be expensive, but we're going to do a bigger program. We're going to take a city of people, say 10,000 people, and this is what we're doing for a year. It's going to be a lot of money, but we're going to see what happens, And
you need longer than a year to really see what the impact is.
Well, 2 years, say 2 years, but again, that's a massive budgetary thing. But I think that wraps it. I think for me, I understand your reservations, but I am more hopeful that with positive information. It's like you can no longer refute that there is positive things about UBI. If not, like to find these articles, it was probably a half-hour web search online to see these positives, and then the Britannica article with the negatives. But it was easier to find positive information than it ever has been. And I think that's what I would say to people that are like, it's a pie in the sky. It's like, well, not really. Like, there's been a lot of stuff in a lot of places. So
there's been a ton of research, in the last decade, I would say there's been a ton of experiments with UBI, and the results have been, by and large, very positive. Most of the negative has all been hypotheticals. What happens about this? What about that? Hey, this experiment only ran for 2 years. And so these people knew that there wasn't like a safety net at the end. So they had an inspiration to improve their position,
right?
Because they knew they were going to lose the money. There's a lot of those arguments. Like I said, my biggest concern about this is the same as almost any government program. The more power you give to the government, the more you require the government to live your daily life, the more freedom you give up as an individual. And the moment the government controls how you pay your rent, how you buy your food, you give up freedom on how to make a decision. Because ultimately, at the end of the day, you're going to be compromised when it comes to making a voting decision when, let's put it this way. You're really going to have a huge struggle when a racist runs for office.
Yeah, I mean,
against someone who wants to get rid of.
Yeah,
now, I'm using an extreme example.
No, are you? The idea is, I get what you're saying. I mean, there's policy concerns, right? Like, most administrations are only in office for 4 years. So what happens at the end of that administration, when they go, both candidates come in, whatever side of the aisle, and they go, it's not really a concern, we're not going to be funding it. It's like, it needs to be a whole cultural shift towards, that's a good thought. I didn't think about that. But I'm still more hopeful that, again, there's more good information than bad. But I think we'll have to wrap it up. So next week, are you going to tell me what we're going to talk about, or is it a surprise? Have you thought about it, or is it going to be a surprise when we start firing up the GarageBand to record?
I actually had some good ideas, and at the moment, I'm having a complete brain freeze, so I don't remember what they were. I had a couple of different ideas. Fine. But I'll bring it up in the next week or so, start looking for some information on it.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, we usually have some time to prep. So is there anything you want to plug?
There's always news.
There's always news. Is there anything you want to plug that you're doing, that you're working on?
Like I talked about before, I've started my new business.
That's right. I forgot to watch your last video.
Doing a real estate agent referral business. So basically helping people find qualified real estate agents as opposed to just working with the first random one they talk with.
Right.
And then giving them tips and pointers on what to do with the agents that maybe they already know or they are working with. So,
for me, that's helpful. And also it's helpful, like the things you wish you knew, right? Going into, like, now that I've purchased a home, there's a lot of stuff I know that I didn't know before. So,
and so the goal is to just, get more kind of insider knowledge that maybe the average person doesn't know about real estate out. So that is youragentguide.com. I don't have a lot of information up there. I'm just going to be totally honest. I'm being really petty. I had a zit on the center of my nose, really large, and I didn't want to record videos with a big Rudolph pimple.
No, it's fine. All that stuff is important. It makes people click on your video. But go there. Is there an email address people can reach you?
Avin, A-V-I-N, at youragentguide.com. If you have any questions, you'd like any particular videos, it'd be great. Check out the website. Read maybe a couple of blog posts I've got up.
Mm-hmm. Oh, and check out our website as well. We do have the Grief for Politics. It is up. It is kind of bare bones. I'm trying to figure out a couple things with that. But on an announcement on the website, two things. One, our last episode went up early because the publishing service I'm using the free version of it. And because I'm doing it free, they do not give you control on when to publish an episode. So they published it a few days early, which isn't a big deal. I will purchase the pro subscription or whatever. And so we'll be able to publish it on our time, which is good. And I'll plug my stuff really quickly, and then I'll talk about how that ties into our website. I have another podcast, Gaming with Grief. It's its own website, www.gamewithgrief.com. Go there. I talk about games, how they cover grief, like we cover in Politcs and things like that, but it's more gaming related, whether it be card games, video games, stuff like that. Go there. The big announcement for that podcast is next week, or at least in a day, I will have episode 100 up. So that's a big deal. And then, yeah, it's pretty crazy. I thought about it the other day. Crap. And then I got that podcast, www.gamingwithgrief.com, or the Gaming with Grief podcast with Joseph Carlson. I got that on the Google Play Store. So if you have an Android device, you can now listen to the podcast, which means that this podcast, The Grief of Politcs, will now be on Google devices, will be on Android devices. So awesome. It was officially on iTunes, but now it'll be on Google. There's some back-end stuff I have to do. I think there's a manual way to reset the feed so you get the episodes faster. When I brought everything over from Apple, it brought all my old episodes over. So 99 episodes of my old podcast hit Google at once. So my wife subscribed. She has an Android device because I just wanted to see what happened. But going on the back end, when I published a podcast that day, it still is in the processing phase, which is really weird. And it's been a week, which is really strange. But I know in Apple iTunes, it took some time for me to publish a few episodes before it was like a 1-day turnaround. So maybe that happens on the Google side. There's a way to manually reset the feed, which I will look into and fix so that way the episodes hit faster. But there is episodes of my podcast up on the Google feed on the Play Store, and then I'll get this podcast, The Grief of Politcs, up on there as well. So if you have an Android device, you can subscribe to us there. And I'll probably make an announcement next month how that's going, and then there's only going to be 4 episodes up or whatever. But I'll get that all going next month. So anything else, Avin? Any cool stuff?
No, that's it for me.
Did you, just as a quick personal aside, did you check out that Lord of the Rings limited edition illustrated thing from Tolkien? That hardcover looks pretty good. It went down in price on Amazon. Apparently the art that he drew for that book has only been shown in one art gallery, like in the 60s or something. So all the illustrations are like somewhat original that'll be in this book. And it was $75 on Amazon, but it went down to $45. So if it's still available, I mean, $45 for a hardcover of Lord of the Rings with like his own illustrations is pretty dope. So,
yep, it was pretty cool. Shared it with Lisa. Both of us were like, ooh.
Yeah. And there's a UK one that I think is specific to the UK. You could probably get it through Amazon, but it's bigger. I think it's taller. It's got like a bigger slipcover with it or something, and the illustrations are. I think it's just a taller book, so you get more of the illustration or something. I'm not sure. But yeah, I guess everybody have a good month, and I think Avin and I will of course, we'll talk to you next month, and be safe, everybody.